So, hi everybody. I hope you enjoy this chat, as I'm going to call it. It's less of a presentation. Um, I want to start real quick just by saying I am not a complete expert on this topic. I wanted to learn more about it, so I found it a great way to do that sometimes is to do the research and bring it in. But I do think it is a great topic to really build off what we heard in Renee's amazing chat earlier today, which is building those relationships, especially as we're working to outreach and involve audiences that have been historically ignored, marginalized, or excluded. And I chose those words on purpose, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I want to start right on this slide. I'd like everybody just to look at it. Don't look at me in this if you're watching speaker view. I'm not that exciting. Take a chance to just look at this picture and drop in the chat some things you see, maybe. Like, what do you notice in this picture? Should be pretty obvious. It's probably a birding group. Most things in my life have to do with birding in some way, but that usually translates to other environmental education or nature outings. But what are some things you notice, just real quick, in this picture about maybe the audience? Anything?
Yeah, so we've got some stuff coming into the chat. We've got a diversity of age, that they're mostly white people. There's some women's, they're happy birders. They look like they're having fun. They're smiling.
Good notices. So you're observing a lot of the things I'd hoped, which is, it is predominantly white, but there are some folks of color mixed in. I love that the smiles, right? People seem to be enjoying the activity that they're doing. One thing you can't notice is possibly the diversity that is not seen. One of the things that I wanted to look at this picture for, this comes from one of Audubon's probably largest success that I've had to do with in working with a maybe historically ignored or marginalized group. This is a picture from about 2 years ago in Central Park in the big anniversary of Pride events. This is a Let's Go Birding Together walk. And for those that might not know, that's a program that back in 2016, I created here at Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center to outreach to the LGBTQ community, and just do an invite and say, hey, we see you. Let's get out birding and chat about other things as well. And that is one of the successes in this type of program that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I wanted to just put that up there for those couple of reasons. One, you noticed, it's great to see a group out in the outdoors, pretty much smiling, obviously enjoying themselves, but at the same time, not a lot of folks of color. There are a few, but also to not forget, sometimes we don't see the diversity. Maybe it's neurodivergent, right? Maybe we have all kinds of different audiences that sometimes we forget, and we're going to touch on that as well. And some other things that I might refer back to this picture. So kind of keep this picture in mind as we go through today. All right. Oh, I always have this problem. There we go. There's a picture of me, the bird nerd, but I wanted to put that up here mainly for those that don't know me. I've been about 15 years in the environmental education sort of arena. I worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for years before, working with Audubon now for the past 7 years or more. And this is sort of the outline of what I'd like to go through today. Real quick, I want to touch on words and language because they are important, especially those three that I just mentioned, right? Historically ignored, marginalized, excluded. Real quick talk about representation and how that is extremely important as well. And then the main topic, which is building relationships, community engagement. I've got some examples and some successes and failures. Always important. I remind people many times, it's okay to try and not succeed at this. It's better than not trying at all, because you learn a lot from when a program or a effort doesn't work. And then hopefully we will have time for some questions and conversation at the end. So I wanted to start with words. The reason I chose the words in the title for this presentation is that words and language matter. It's really easy to use the same words over and over and over. And I'm going to use an example before I get to the story of this picture of bird walks. Since again, I'm going to use birding a lot in this talk since it's what I do the most. It's the type of program we do at Audubon the most, right? Dealing with birds. We are changing a lot of our programming from bird walk to bird outing. You don't need to be able to walk to see birds or go for a long walk or a hike. There's just more welcoming language and other types of language to use when thinking about our environmental education programs. And sometimes we just get stuck in using what we've always done, and that can cause problems. These are some of the words and language that I want to talk about in just a second. But real quick, the story of the picture that you can see there. The young man in the picture with, if you didn't notice, on his arm, a baby fledgling white-breasted nuthatch that appeared during a field trip. He was so excited and was so calm. It was great. We could get the picture. His name is Galliano, and his friend Josue behind him. I bring that up because you see the smiles. Not only did they get to see a bird that close, which is super exciting for anybody, but Galliano was a very new to the country English language learner. And what I wanted to mention about the story is just my tiny bit of Spanish. I definitely do not speak Spanish fluently, but that was exactly what I said. You know, I told him and the students, you know, mi español es muy mal, it's not good. So even knowing one or two phrases, right? We bonded over my knowing aves is the word for bird. That just relaxed everyone into knowing that I was willing to be able to chat as much as I could and learn from them. Many of you that are educators may know the term funds of knowledge. Don't forget those. Your students come to you with funds and founts of knowledge already. So don't start with the deficit that you need to teach them everything. Explore with them, and being able to use any small bits of their language, their types of word is a great connector. I want to mention the words I had in the title, because we tend to, and they're being used more recently, but we tend to in the past have used diverse more, right? Diverse audiences or underrepresented. Sometimes those can cause it to seem like it's the audience's fault, when that's not necessarily the case. Conservation and many other things in our systems across the country, to me, it's more important to really use what's going on, which is audiences have been historically just either ignored, right, where we haven't thought of them at all, excluded, we have thought of them and we didn't know how to reach them, or we chose not to, or marginalized audiences. Those might be the diverse audiences like that first slide, the LGBTQ community, where you don't see their diversity on the page necessarily in front of you as an audience. But they're a group that has been marginalized, and you might want to do a specific invite out to a group. I like to really think about the language when describing a program that you might want to do. I'm going to skip this middle one in a second because I've got slides about to pop up about those, and quick go down to the bottom ones, which is don't forget to, if you're creating a program or outreaching to an audience, learn some of their cultural terms, right? Learn what perhaps, like in Renee's talk this morning, building off that, like I learned about the offering of tobacco. That was new to me, and how I could use that maybe when outreaching to someone that I wanted to speak, right? Or an elder, or if I'm presenting to the tribal council on something we would like to work with them on, taking, you know, knowing the cultural practices or language. And not to forget names and pronouns. I know several of them, of us, have those right in our names and screens now, but it's a really, really easy step, and it's very, very important. If you go back to that first slide, in fact, I'm going to back up and see if I can go there real quick for you. Right here, our tour leader that day was Martha Harbison. I made the mistake, and I knew this when I was introducing her. We had such a big turnout for that walk. And I said, she, and then I caught myself and I said, I'm sorry, Martha, they are going to be leading us. Martha is non-binary and goes by they, them, and totally made them smile because I took the time to correct myself, right? Didn't get too worried or nervous that I made a mistake. That's okay. It's still something many of us are new to learning how to use that language, right? To remember to do so. But doing so can be very important. I think about, again, our school field trips here. I'm seeing many more non-binary and trans students in the school system coming on field trips. So if you are not sure, ask. It's the easiest thing. It's like, my pronouns are he, his. What are yours? Right? It's a really easy thing to do. And it makes that audience, that student, that adult on the program feel seen and respected, and it makes that whole engagement so much more meaningful and impactful. I want to touch real quick on these words too, because they are important when we are trying to reach historically ignored and excluded audiences. Many of us all, and it can be slightly different depending on each organization, the order or the exact wording, right? But most of the time it's diversity, equity, inclusion in some form. We have committees and task force working on that. Audubon has added the word belonging to ours as sort of a final step. Is if you achieve the first three, does everyone really truly feel like they belong in the organization or the club or the group? A couple of slides I wanted to talk about this on is just to explain those. Sometimes not everybody knows exactly what they mean. And I like this graphic. I think it explains it really well in a simple way, which is diversity usually asks, like, who's in the room? Do we have all of the types of audiences and peoples in the room or in the group or in the tour that we're trying to put together? Equity is there something keeping anyone out? Are there some barriers? Many of you have probably seen that graphic of the people standing on a box. If everybody's giving a crate to stand to see the baseball game, the short person still can't see over the fence and the tall person can. You were trying to make it equitable, but it really wasn't. Being truly equitable is giving everybody a box, but of different heights so that everyone still has the same experience. Inclusion then is once you have what you believe is equitable, is everybody truly included, right? Are you being inclusive? So you've got everybody in the room or in the group, but are you actually listening to everyone's input? Are you taking that in the same way? And where belonging adds is now that everybody's in the group, everybody is committed to the same goals, do they all truly feel like they belong? Now, I love this graphic and I just found it. As I mentioned, I love to do research on topics like this because I can continue to learn more. If you notice, these are in the opposite order that they usually come. It's almost always DEI, right? Trying to outreach to a diverse audience first, then be equitable and get to inclusion, right? That's your ultimate goal. What if you started at inclusion, right? Going right to there, like really include everybody all the time. You are going to get your results in the others more organically and by doing this. So I just loved this graphic. I think it's a great way to think about this. We could do a whole presentation and talk just about equity, diversity, inclusion, but that is not my goal. And we would want someone else to bring in that is an expert on that. But I just wanted to touch on those terms since they are coming up in the presentation today. Representation matters. I wanted to touch on this too, because it's a big part of building relationships with new audiences, especially any of those that have been ignored or excluded in the past. This is a picture of the staff at Edinburgh Scenic Wetlands, a world birding center down in Edinburgh, Texas, right in the Rio Grande Valley. Now, if I had a picture of the staff 10 years ago at that location, only I believe Marissa here on the right would be about the same. They made a big and conscious change about, I want to say 8 to 10 years ago, and it was amazing. I got the chance to hear Marissa speak in the Rio Grande Valley when I worked for Audubon in San Antonio. And what they looked at is the demographics of their center. They are right near a county park, and there would be hundreds, if not thousands of people there every weekend, out picnicking, enjoying the county park. but none of them would pay admission and come into the Edinburgh Scenic Wetlands to go on the bird and butterfly tours and to see the amazing habitat that they were working so hard in all of their great environmental programs. They really looked at why. And the really reason was they had literally one person of Hispanic and or Latinx background working for them, and everyone else was white. So they made a conscious change with their board, their staff. And I want to touch on this last one, facilities especially, to change that, to become a part of the community and to represent the community. So over the years, they have changed who their staff is, who their board is. And the facilities one I want to mention is they realized the audience they were trying to reach being the Rio Grande Valley. If you know, it's 99%, it's almost, I think, 98.9% of Hispanic or Latinx, Latino, Latina background. That's the demographics there. One of the things they all knew was familia is very important, and they travel together. So their picnic tables all held 4 to 6 people. They changed that. They made the choice of getting all new picnic tables and or putting 2 together so that all of them held up to 12 people, and it made a huge difference. It just took looking at who your staff is and what your facilities are, who you're trying to reach, and being very, very strategic in how to reach them. And I thought that was very brilliant. And it's been extremely successful. They are now like one of the best nature centers down in the Rio Grande Valley, doing amazing programs to all the community, but especially the community that they are living and working in. One more example, and then we're going to move on to the main topic. I wanted to highlight one of Audubon's amazing people that represents us really well. Right here in the picture, you can see our new head of conservation. This is Marshall. Marshall is a rancher up in Audubon, Dakotas, or was. He'll be working for our national office, probably still out of the Dakotas, but for the national office out of New York. But he's a rancher, he's a Black person, and he absolutely loves that role, showing that there are Black ranchers and farmers and being that person. I bring that up because not only is he great as a representative, someone that can show his community that there are people in conservation, in ranching that look like they do, but at the same time, to be careful of not using something that is like tokenism, right? Not just finding or inviting one person to be on a board or in a program because they are the demographic that you want to work with. Maybe it's building a relationship with that person first. They may know the right connection if they are not. So I think that's just something quick to bring up. We can talk about that more later if you would like. But let's get into the meat of the presentation, which is relationships, relationships, relationships. Renee mentioned this. It could not be more important. And I thought I'd start with community engagement basically is kind of outreach, right? That's where we use it. I found this graphic on community engagement and how to build relationships, and I found something really important missing. There's all those words there in the pictures of ways that you can build relationships and do community engagement. Anybody see the one that I think is missing? It's time. It always seems to be that we want to rush, oh, we need to do this and we need to get this. If you do not take the time to build relationships, they rarely are successful. There can be some beginning, small successes, but it takes time. So don't rush it. Really make them authentic and take the time to build them and not just say, we have to do this, let's do this and make it work. There's the definition of a relationship. And I put that up there because I'm going to just read it. The way in which 2 or more people, groups, or countries talk to, behave toward, and deal with each other. But even if you think of these larger groups like us as organizations, countries working together, it still comes down to this: 2 people, because almost always when a group or a larger organization wants to work with each other, they send representatives. So it starts with 2 people. Can we meet? Let's have coffee. I loved that Renee brought that up because it's literally what the Let's Go Birding Together program is, which is it's an invite to talk. Let's just chat over something, right? Let's go birding and take a walk. And while we do that, let's build a relationship so that we can do more important things in the future, right? Let's go over coffee. Let's go out for a drink. Let's have some food, right? Food is a great one. Music is another, right? Arts are a great thing to create together and to build relationships, but it literally comes down to taking the time for two people to do that, find the commonality, and can see then where those organizations or groups can continue building. Want to throw up this quick quote from America Ferrara too. Many of you may know her as the actress, but she's also an amazing activist for Latinx civil rights, and especially within the acting world, making sure women and Latina women are equal in the acting world. But I liked this. She's talking about personal, sort of loving romantic relationships, but it works in all venues as well, right? They take time and energy. So what a lot of time people forget around community engagement and building these relationships, you're probably already tired. Work takes that out of you. A tip I can give you is work with your manager, work with your boss, work with your supervisors to make sure that if your role is in building new relationships or in community engagement in any way, there isn't a time frame. You need to be able to have flexible time where it's not always 8 hours at the office every day. You need to be at events. You need to be out in that community you want to build a relationship with and showing them that you truly care, right? So showing up outside of the usual work hours is very important as well. Also, building the trust, right? So if you're starting those relationships, you can't just start and say oh, yeah, no, I know them. I think we can do a program with them. Do they trust you yet? And being okay if they don't. An example I'll give you is right now, our relationship there are 4, as Renee mentioned, tribal nations in Nebraska, right? We have the Winnebago, Omaha, Ponca they don't have the land, and then the Santee Sioux out northwest a little more. We have not built a relationship with the Santee Sioux, and that's partly on their choice. They are dealing with other issues. We have not had a chance to build that relationship, and they don't trust us, right? This will come up again later when we talk about some of the failures. There are groups that see Audubon as a very white, colonizing type of organization. That is absolutely okay and must be respected. So also be okay with it's not going to work now, but how can we continue to let's try later, or what can we do to improve that relationship? But once you have that trust, that's where I believe the most important and impactful programming can truly start. All right, so I wanted to give you some successes, because I find one of the ways I learn the best in topics like this is from things that worked and things that didn't. What you see on the screen right now is my really early attempt. Way back in 2016, I was part of Audubon's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team, had gone to several trainings. And the way it worked then was we had a cohort across the country on trying to work on projects. What could we do to keep moving things forward? So I created this program. I just happened to be thinking about who I could outreach to, who's a group that I know, right? We had identified who are some groups we want to work with. But at that time, I wasn't a part of that community, and I didn't have any close relationships built yet to be able to outreach to some of those. And I'm like, I'm part of the LGBT community. I could outreach to that group. They have been historically ignored and marginalized for sure over the years. I wonder what we could do. And it just was happy luck. I happened to look at the letters LGBT and was like, let's go birding together. Hey, that would be really fun. I happened to at that time be on the board of Outlink, which is now out in Nebraska. They've expanded and are statewide, which is super exciting. And I brought this to them. I'm like, what do you think? Could we do something around just a bird walk or two to just like chat about what else our LGBT community needs? Like, what do they see in what Audubon is doing in conservation? Is there any things that we could connect around? And they loved the idea. On our very first walk, I believe we had 16 people. Now, to a lot of places, that's not huge, but to us, that was a big success. And even more so than the numbers of people, several of those people became long-term volunteers who still volunteer here at Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center. Many have become donors or members at Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center. That was to us an even bigger success. And on the other hand, as a board member of Outlink, it was a really great way for the LGBT community to feel seen and represented by maybe an organization that they hadn't thought of before, as well as to be in a program and be their authentic self, right? We're going to talk about that, I think, a lot coming forward, which is one of the important parts of outreaching to historically ignored audiences, is they want to come as their authentic self. And many of our past ways of programming have not always welcomed that. So again, 2016, we started with a really simple invite. Like I said, we had a pretty small group and it was not a very nice birding day, but it was just so nice to be out using birding as the sort of conversation starter, and then just hear from folks. Just say, oh my God, I haven't seen you forever. How have you been? Have you been to Spring Creek before? Do you like this idea? Look at that from 2019. What a difference. We had to like have a second walk because so many people wanted to come and join us. It was a really great success. And so much that we decided to launch it. Think back to that very first slide you saw. Nationally in 2018, I kept poking at Audubon nationally. I knew a few folks in the national office, and I said, you know, it would be really easy. I'll do the work. If I can go out to our center and office center network and say, hey, would you be interested in doing a Let's Go Birding Together event? It could be a walk. We've started adding brunch to ours, so it's Let's Go Birding and Brunching Together. So after the walk, we have a little brunch. Some groups have decided to march in the local Pride Parade. There's lots of ways. I said, can we just get on the national page, a list of those during Pride Month? Let's just list where some Let's Go Birding Together events are happening. And it took some doing. Not everyone was sure. They were worried about some of our members and audiences that might have been more conservative worrying about this. We also hear some flack every once in a while. It's like, isn't this actually being exclusionary? And it's actually not, because these are welcome to everyone. They are just specifically inviting an audience that has not specifically been invited before, and saying, we see you, we celebrate you, we want you here, we want to hear what you have to say, we want to be a partner in the community. That was successful as well. So if you've seen now, we have Let's Go Birding Together swag. We have events going on across the country. I believe in 2020, we all know what happened. There would have been the largest Let's Go Birding Together Pride Month ever that year had it not mostly gone virtual, but they still happened. And we're hoping to continue that. We're very excited. I'm the most excited that it's a great model. I use this as a model for other groups when I'm outreaching, because I remember it's as simple as inviting someone for a bird walk or to go have coffee, like Renee said, and learn about that community or that group and hear what they have to say, and then figure out programming from there. Another success, and this is on a smaller level, but I absolutely loved doing this. I found it personally one of the most impactful, is we at Spring Creek Prairie are partners with Lincoln's Asian Cultural and Community Center. And I was really nervous the very first time I went to meet them. We specifically work with their seniors group that they support. And they invited me to come in and talk, but they said it will be through an interpreter, and she will need to interpret in 2 or 3 languages. The senior group you see in the picture especially is many folks of the Karen background, from the area of the world, Laos, Thailand, like in there. And it took me a long time. I was really nervous. I was worried about how much I could get across through so many different languages. And I came upon a topic that ended up working really well, which is I decided, since I wanted to talk about birds in Nebraska, because the ultimate goal was to get the seniors out for a birding walk, but I wanted to meet them first. They didn't know who I was. They didn't trust me. I researched 5 birds that we have in Nebraska and 5 birds that would be from where most of these people were from originally when they were younger, that they might remember that are related. So I took, you'll see, and if you can see the small picture here, I've got a northern bobwhite there that we have across Nebraska. And there was a quail from Thailand, the hills of Thailand, that was very similar and related. So I did that with 5 birds, and their eyes would light up seeing pictures of birds they remembered as a kid, and they had stories they wanted to tell me. We got through so little of what I had taken in as quote unquote curriculum, but what we got was their passion and their memories and storytelling to then let me hear what mattered to them, and allowed us to then explore birds more, birds they might see here in their neighborhood, which ultimately then led to the group. And we had a really, really fun time going out on a bird walk in Cooper Park, which was around where many of the seniors lived, instead of bringing them all the way to Spring Creek, which they have been to now since. And the thing I want to mention here that I still remember to this day is we saw a few birds, right? The thing I remember more than that was I learned one of the words for squirrel in the Karen language, which is li. And we saw way more squirrels than we did birds that day. But it just gave me the opportunity to learn as much as they did. How are we doing on time, Amanda?
Jason, yep, we
Yes.
got about 10 minutes left. So I just
Perfect.
was letting you know.
Thank you. We're perfect time then. I've got a few more slides and then we'll have plenty of time to open it up for questions and chat. Another big success going on both within Audubon and outside of it is birding by ear. It happens to be one of my skills. So I tried to use that. I've done many programs across the country in San Antonio and here, birding for the blind. You'll see a picture here in the upper right. That is the Lincoln Public Schools VIP program, visually and impaired and blind students. So we worked with them just starting. Again, I went into their club meeting first and just chatted. And we listened to some bird noises and just got to know each other. Like, have you been out birding before? Anybody interested in being outside at all? And then building on that to, I think we ended up having 3 or 4 different field trips over those couple of years. We caught tadpoles and we listened to all kinds of birds. Again, I swear I learned more than most of the students in how to relate to someone with a very different worldview, right? How do I listen better? What does it truly sound like when I close my eyes? Because it's different than when I am always having, visual stimulus bombarding me. One of the most successful programs going now, and I can take absolutely no credit in this one, but if you don't know about them, Birdability is a new 501c3. I do know the amazing Virginia Rose you see here in the wheelchair, and Freya McGregor, who is one of their head on their board and educators. It is an amazing program. If you don't know them, check out their website and their Facebook page. They are an amazing resource if you are planning to outreach to an organization or a club that has especially neurodivergent, different types of abilities, etc. They have amazing things you can do. One of the easiest is if you go out for nature walks or outings anywhere, put that area, just do your assessment on how accessible it is for others and put that in their website. That helps us get a baseline of where are there places for people of other abilities to go and have nature access, right? They've helped us put together some backpacks with tools so that if visitors come to Spring Creek Prairie, right, we might have some noise canceling headphones they can borrow if they have a student where just all of the cicada noise is too much, right? Thinking of those things, and they're a great resource. So lean on them and use it to think about them. If you're planning a program, I try to always go to their website. Okay, what am I forgetting? Oh my gosh, yes, I need to think about this and this as well, so that truly everyone is welcome to our program. There's also sometimes where you can't quite call it a success yet. One of the things, part of that is, and I know all of you know this, COVID has put a real stopper sometimes in what you can get done. Our tribal partnership work, there's Renee, she's been partnering with us now for almost 3 years. We love working with her. But the original goals were to be doing in tribal communities, right, up in Winnebago, in Macy, with the Ponca at some of their areas that they use along the Niobrara, or here at their new office buildings in Lincoln, to do some in-person projects. But with COVID, we haven't been able to do that. So being able to be flexible and not let those partnerships fall apart, right? Sometimes if you let pauses go too much, you have to rebuild them, or staff or persons change and you have to rebuild those. So keeping that just check-ins, right? So I have not been able to do a program with our friends at the Ponca Tribe in Nebraska in 1.5 years. But about every month, 2 months, I'll send a note and just say, hey, I'm just checking in. Do we still want to have a web? Do we still want to be on hold? How are we? Like, and then I can hear back, nope, it's not a priority right now. You know, we have ill people, we need to worry about this. But they know that I'm still truly interested and that I want to keep that relationship going. The other is being flexible and changing what your goals are, right? So during COVID, what we decided to do was we would build some informational documents instead that could be used once we're back together, instead of doing those in-person meetings while we couldn't. So we worked with the Winnebago Renaissance program, which is their language program, and keeping the Ho-Chunk language going. And we did these 2 brochures in both English and Ho-Chunk, which is a really cool resource that we were able to put together, and or using our relationships to help our programs. So we try to include Renee in several of our programs throughout the year so that we have the Indigenous view, right? This is her speaking about coyote tales and the myth of coyotes in many native teachings. She has come out and taught about star knowledge at one of our astronomy nights when we were out as well. Just using those, a diverse amount of voices, so they're not always hearing from me and my knowledge, but many others as well. And finally, I wanted to touch on failures because they're important. And sometimes calling this even a failure maybe isn't the right word. But these are 2 groups that Audubon nationally and or locally have wanted to or tried to work with, and they haven't quite succeeded. There's a couple of different reasons for that. One might be Outdoor Afro, which is an amazing organization. If you don't know them, they're doing amazing things across the country. They specifically are one of those organizations, and rightly so, that is not sure Audubon is in the place to partner with them yet. They really want it to be for people of color, especially Black African Americans, to get out and learn about being in the outdoors, to experience hiking, swimming, boating, skiing, etc. And that's okay. That's their goal, without anyone else bothering that goal. And so most times when we've asked, they've said, you know, not yet, or we're not sure Audubon's who we want to partner with. That is totally valid and okay. And we respect that, and they do amazing things. Hopefully, what the goal is Audubon will get to that place where they'll notice and say, we've seen the change. I think it's time to chat, and maybe it's time that we can partner. Same thing with Latino Outdoors, but that's also, think back to the representation slide. I don't speak Spanish. I also don't have anyone on our staff currently that is Latinx. I think that's a goal. We need to get there before making authentic relationships to continue making those work. And with that, I am going to try to save the rest of it for questions and or chat on the topic.
Well, oh, look at that little guy or gal, one bird.
I wish I had
we
that
put
hair.
a lot of, yes, they're so cute. Oh, sorry. I could talk birds all day with you, Jason, but there were a couple links that we put it in the chat for you. So what questions do you have for Jason? What are some things that you were wanting to know more information about, or some of the different relationships that he's made with some of the historically ignored, excluded, or marginalized groups of folks?
Or even comments if you think I'm crazy or a point that you noticed.
There were some great comments. So the one graphic that you shared that had inclusivity first, folks were wondering where maybe you found that graphic, because that one was something that I know that I haven't seen it in that order as well. Oh, and Caroline was wanting to know what term you used instead of taking a bird walk. You took a bird
outing.
Outing. Okay.
Yep.
Outing. Thank you.
And again, that is something Birdability taught me. Just rethinking about language. If you don't know, actually, is she presenting? I think she's presenting later.
Yeah.
Cassandra Dean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cassandra
After
is
lunch.
the Birdability captain. She's amazing. So if you happen to sit in there, or if you are watching the other, just contact her. She loves to chat with you. Check on their website. But she had kind of mentioned that, and it was something that as I work with Birdability, I am learning, which is, again, that language matters, right? It doesn't hurt me at all to change it to a bird outing, but that may make it more accessible, or someone will see that and be like, oh, right? For example, we have monthly guided bird outings that we plan at Spring Creek Prairie in the warmer months, right? Usually April through October-ish. We're going to focus those on staying on our accessible trails most of the time, so they can be really accessible. And then instead, in the summer months, we will have other bird outings that will go farther afield, but just stating that in the program description so that folks know, right? If I've got a little one, or if I have a student or a family member in a wheelchair, this might be the one that I go to and not the other, can be really important.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Because yeah, sometimes our words, they have power, right? Right. And they get people interested in our program, and especially what our descriptions are like. So what other questions do we have for Jason during our last minute that we're together before the most important part of the day, which is lunch? Okay. Right. We're used to working with kids, right? So is Let's Go Birding just an Audubon program, or can other organizations partner with Audubon to put this program other places?
No, I completely would love others to take it, and I know others have. So Let's Go Birding Together isn't necessarily copyrighted. I do think to use any of the type of logos. So Audubon has created a lot of graphics and actual sway, like things that you can purchase with that logo. That's copyrighted because that's something Audubon created for the program, but the program itself isn't. So the idea and using those 4 words, I will say, if you're thinking of doing that, especially with the LGBTQ community, and don't forget, sometimes I say those 5 letters because it's quicker, but it's the 2S, right? Two spirit, and then there's also TIGQ++. Don't forget everybody in at least once in maybe when you're advertising, and then you can shorten it later. But yes, please consider that model. If you are planning to work with the LGBT community, though, I would check with someone in that community. There was one sort of feedback we received was a promotion once was unclear, and several community members thought it looked like we were trying to change what LGBT means, right? It has already existing meaning. So having that very clearly stated, that's why you saw both wording was on that original logo. I think that's important as well. But I think that goes with any type of audience you're trying to reach to. Find someone in that community and start that relationship first, sometimes, and make that invite instead of just doing it out of the blue. But good question.
Yes, excellent point.